they both got the perfect balance of crazy as hell and lovers of Christ. And as a minister of the gospel, I gotta say that I don't even think God would have a problem with how they give it up. When the Israelites was warring with the Canaanites, God told them to kill everything moving. Same God back then, same God right now.
This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, Resurrection, Part 18. When we left off, Danny Briggs was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He had no idea when he'd taken that job in Puerto Rico that he was basically ruining his whole life. The men that he had in Puerto Rico overseeing his safe house were basically puppets in the hand of the man that they had kidnapped. Natalia Jiminez was calling the shots. Whoever owned the voice that had been calling Danny on the phone and giving him orders had shown that he wasn't nothing to play with. He not only had Danny's wife and 2 daughters, but he was piecemealing him his own money, compromising his soldiers, and guaranteeing that he would never be able to do business again. He figured that he'd be lucky if he got his wife and children back and at least most of his money. He was willing to do just about anything to at least get that. He didn't even know a whole lot about the 5 families' other efforts to take down the international trafficking organization. All he knew for sure was that the lieutenant he had responsible for communicating with the traffickers had been in constant communication and negotiations with the Briggs organization's contact. And that man was absolutely refusing to come and have a sit-down conversation with Big Nate, right up until he got the phone call, notifying him that the daughter of one of their top connects had also been kidnapped. Danny had been informed that he needed to pretend like he was involved in the kidnapping of some woman in New York to help cover up the dirty dealings of Sincere St. James. But he had no idea that the woman who'd been kidnapped was also connected to the international trafficking organization. Then he thought to himself, this type of stuff only happens in New York Times bestsellers. And I was thinking from Danny's lips to God's ears. But anywho, learning this new bit of information had Danny figuring in for a penny, in for a pound. If he had to go over the ledge, the least he could do was bust his behind to make sure that the Lopez organization's efforts were successful. So he did precisely what the voice on the other end of the phone told him to do. He had his lieutenant communicate with the contact at the trafficking organization and tell him that if he wasn't going to sit down with Big Nate, then he'd better have his boss's boss sit down with Danny Briggs. Otherwise, Donald Green would be learning that it was the international trafficking organization who put him up to snatching his daughter. And it didn't matter whether that was true or not, because he had a surefire way to ensure that Donald Green believed it. And just like that, the previously reluctant contact had become agreeable. And as quickly as he changed his mind, Nate changed his request. Because if they were willing to give in to that demand, why stop there? He had the lieutenant call the contact and give him the phone. And when the call was connected, Big Nate said, "How many battles y'all gotta lose before y'all realize this ain't a war y'all can win?" The contact said, "We'd have to lose the war to accept that we lost the war." Big Nate said, "You gotta be smarter than that. If you know, like I know, you will make arrangements for my boss to have a sit down with yours. And by yours, I certainly don't mean the man right over you. I mean the head honcho." The contact said, "Why would I do that?" Big Nate said, "'Cause you've just been kidnapped, stupid." And then Big Nate hung up, while the man did everything he could to try to get out of the back seat of the chauffeured car that was transporting him from his hotel to the safe house. His phone rang again, and this time it was a FaceTime from his wife. She never hit him with a blind FaceTime. She never called him while he was out of town on business, and he'd already checked in with her for the day. So there was no reason for her to be calling him at all. And that was even more reason why he needed to answer the damn phone. When he did, he found out that the stakes had just been raised again. Because on the other side of that FaceTime, his very pregnant wife was gagged and tied up. And he was kicking himself for not refusing this job. He had told the higher-ups that it was a bad idea to go after the next queenpin of the Lopez organization. Not solely because she was female, but because she was pregnant, and the plan included her small child and her husband. And for all the notorious 5 families talk about honor among thieves, he knew all that was going to go out the window the minute they put that pregnant woman and her child in play. And that's when it hit him. The only reason why Danny Briggs would go so hard to try to get him to sit down with a kidnappee and then turn around and kidnap the daughter of one of the head honcho's closest friends and best allies is if the 5 families had gotten a hold of his family too. What he couldn't figure out, though, is why they needed to take him and his wife. And he was almost afraid to find out.
He just sat back in the back seat and gave in. At about that same time in Texas, things weren't going all that well for the International Trafficking Organization in Houston either. Now, initially, they had at least one operation that they thought had been successful. They were absolutely behind the disappearance of Tamara. And up until that point, they thought that Amber's kidnapping was retaliation for that.
So Johnny Decker was patiently waiting, just like Donald Green was,
to receive some kind of demands from the 5 families, a hostage exchange or something. Days and days had passed, and they hadn't heard a word. Initially, they thought that the 5 families either hadn't made the connection or had just deferred to the feds, because they had certainly been keeping them busy. They'd gone after Donovan's wife and his baby's mother. They'd gone after Michael. They'd successfully snatched Simone. They'd killed Big Wood, gone after True, and taken out an old lady that was connected to the families, Miss Bernie. The operation in Puerto Rico hadn't been a success, but having one of the top generals in the Lopez organization was supposed to be a consolation prize. So when they heard from Johnny Decker that his servers had been attacked, all of his finances had been frozen, and most of his wealth had been transferred out of his accounts, even the head honcho was nervous. Johnny Decker had no idea who was responsible for the cyber attack. They hadn't made any demands up until that point. However, when he came into the office that morning and logged into his computer, a computer that his tech team had assured him was safe to use, he found that he was locked out of his files and there was a message on the screen telling him they had a meeting scheduled for 10 a.m. with the hacker who was going by the moniker Him. The location was to be determined, and he should sit and wait. His tech team couldn't figure out what the moniker Him even stood for. It wasn't even spelled H-I-M. It was spelled H-E-M. All they knew for sure was whoever this hacker was, he or she was good. They'd gotten in and out in the middle of the night without a trace, been all up and through his files, business and personal, and had hit all of his accounts, business and personal. So by 9 a.m., Johnny Decker was sweating bullets. And by 9:30, he was pacing the floors of his office. He had already cursed his tech team and his accountant up one side and down the other. And that had got him absolutely zilch. To make matters worse, his phone was ringing off the hook. Because unlike all the other organizations that the traffickers had hired to do their dirty work,
Johnny Decker was in deep with the traffickers, while also running a publicly traded company.
He had both political and law enforcement ties. And nobody would have ever guessed that he had a team of goons, because he was as dirty as they came. He should have been immune to a cyber attack of this magnitude. Why? Because he was the head of the international tech company, responsible for keeping the trafficking organization's secrets safe. See, his company server wasn't connected to the server where he maintained all of the files for his clients. The photos and videos that made their way to the dark web. The porn that was illegal, absolutely immoral, and downright disgusting. Now, I don't judge anybody's kinks, but anything that does not involve consenting adults is downright vile. And there are people who not only capture it and trade it, but individuals who purchase it. And there's a place in hell for them. Unfortunately, there's a place in this evil world for them too. And a place where they keep the evidence of their dirt. And Johnny Decker's company provided them that place. Fortunately though, the calls he'd been getting that morning from those very angry customers were in reference to their inability to access the files that were supposed to be kept safe on his firm's server. The hacker had set his whole world ablaze. And if he didn't get this mess under control soon, not only was he on his way to a federal prison, but so were thousands of his loyal customers. He was hoping and praying that the fact that a finger hadn't been laid on that dang on Tamara girl would be enough to get him out of this. He had no idea when he concocted this scheme with his longtime friend who was the head of the International Trafficking Organization that the block was going to get this hot. He figured that back against the wall, Quincy Anders St. James IV would find a way to convince the feds to plead out the hundreds of trafficking organization employees that they had in their custody and back up off the organization in exchange for the release of the chief of police's daughter. He had clearly underestimated that man. And he knew that the 5 families had some serious geeks on their team. Heck, the Quincy dude was one of them. There was no way in hell that he would have even gotten involved at this level if he knew they had a hacker of this magnitude on their payroll.
Too bad he didn't know that the head honcho had an ulterior motive for enlisting him for this job.
Meanwhile, in Denton, Texas, Angela was extremely frustrated with both of her mothers-in-law. The Queen Mother had made it clear she wasn't telling her nothing about what the kids had been into. And when she had been attempting to question Michael, Mom Brenda had interrupted and confessed that she knew Melissa had left the property. She didn't know when, she didn't know why, But out of respect, Samuel had called her, told her that he'd be coming to pick up Melissa and Karma, that he'd had Q's okay, and that he was asking her not to tell Angela unless she absolutely felt like she had to. Mom Brenda said, Angela, honey, I'm telling you this because I don't want you harassing that boy. I know my grandson, and I know that we've been talking to him his entire life since he joined the family. But as a grandmother, I know him in a way that you just don't. And as a mother, you know him in ways that I just don't. For years, I have been trying to get you girls to stop putting your hands in stuff and trying to control the outcomes. And I get that y'all got some things going on that I don't know a whole lot about. I understand why you all have to do some of the things you do. I'm not trying to prevent you from parenting. You do a tremendous job. But you got to know that even I saw this day coming. The same way you've tried to get out in front of it, so have I. I literally had a conversation with him and his sister just hours before I got that phone call from Samuel. I knew something was afoot. And I didn't just turn a blind eye or keep it from you, as if I didn't know that what the boy decided to do was going to be important. Hear me and hear me good. What don't come out in the wash always comes out in the rinse, baby. You've gotten a pretty good command on trusting other adults, and now it's time that you learn to trust those children. Or at the very least, trust God with those children. This is the part where the rubber hits the road. And believe you me, I am as proud of you as I ever will be, because I see you. You ain't been putting your head in the sand and waiting to suffocate. You've been moving around with both your eyes open. Well, baby, right now I'm going to need you to squint, okay? That boy knows Christ. He also knows what kind of man he wants to be. And while he is a lot like his uncle, he's also a lot like his father and his grandfather. He's got all that, all wrapped up in him. And while you and he may not share DNA, he's got you in there too. Angela had heard Mom Brenda. She trusted her judgment, and she appreciated the fact that she'd come to her and had the conversation. But now here they were days later, and Angela had gotten an alert from the school system that Michael had been absent from 3 of his classes that morning. He was being homeschooled, but all of his classes offered the students the opportunity to attend class remotely. To maintain the older children's ability to remain social, their parents had allowed them to attend class virtually, which meant that if they didn't log on, have their cameras on, and participate, they would be marked absent. So Angela called over to the main house to find out what the hell Michael was doing. And that's when Mom Brenda told her that Michael wasn't even there. He'd slept at home the night before, got up with his siblings, got dressed, had breakfast, headed over to the main house, and never even went inside because his Uncle Samuel had picked him up. The boy had been gone for hours, and not one member of the grandmother crew, plus Chantal, had even thought to call her. And then Mom Brenda had the unmitigated gall to say, girl, I don't know how many ways I can tell you to mind your business. Samuel called and told me he was coming to get that boy and asked me not to tell you unless I felt like I had to. I didn't feel like I had to until you called me. Now, you need to be glad that I tell you anything, because if you act a fool, I won't tell you nothing else. Angela said, you've got to be kidding me. What part of I'm the parent? Mom Brenda said, no, what part of you are not in control are you having a difficult time understanding? Go take a nap. Feed one of them babies. Something. Hell, call Regina back. Or better yet, go by her house and have a conversation with LJ and see if he can't call Regina. You know how that girl is. She's in her feelings, she's embarrassed, and she got too much pride to come home and apologize. Angela said, I already spoke to LJ, Mom Brenda. He's adamant that he's not begging Regina to come home. He's asked me to stay out of it and keep my mouth shut. And when I talked to Q briefly, he didn't want to discuss it. He just told me to leave Regina alone, like I was the one doing something to her. Mom Brenda said, well, listen to your husband. Don't listen to me because you ain't got to sleep with me. But listen to me about Michael. He got it. He knows right from wrong. Go rub your feet together. Do something else other than get on my nerves. Goodbye. And then Mom Brenda hung up the phone. At her wit's end, Angela finally did the one thing she'd been neglecting. She just went ahead and took it to the Father in prayer. And by the time she was done, she felt like a weight had been lifted. Yes, she was still worried about her son. She didn't want him to hurt anyone, and she didn't want anybody to hurt him. She wanted him to let the adults handle the situation. Not because there wasn't anything that he could do, but because all the things that she could think of that he could possibly do were all criminal, dangerous, potentially life-threatening for him and others. She was also afraid that if he crossed that line, he wasn't going to be able to come back from it. So many of the people that she knew who was in that life had been introduced to it as teenagers, and they'd gotten stuck in it either because of the money, because of some false sense of loyalty because they'd made decisions that didn't lend themselves to walking away and having a legitimate career. It had run-ins with law enforcement. Their fingerprints were on file with the FBI. They were known associates of felons, but they were felons themselves. And while Michael had access to resources because his parents had access to resources, those resources were only so useful for keeping his name off an indictment or in an obituary. And then she thought of the one person she hadn't talked to since all the drama started, Donovan. Michael's disappearing acts started right after he had that conversation with Donovan. When Angela had spoken to Donovan last, in reference to Michael, he'd been clear that whatever secrets Michael had was safe with him. So Angela hadn't even wasted her time contacting him and following up on that conversation. But if Michael and everybody else wanted her to fall back and they were insistent on not telling her anything about what he was doing, then somebody was going to tell her something that would make it easier for her to do that. And if she knew her son and she knew Donovan, then she knew Donovan would be that person. So she called him. When Donovan answered the phone, he said, "What up, sis?" Angela said, "What's up? It's your nephew is MIA. You know anything about that, Donovan?" Donovan said, "Now, come on. That's my man's 50 grand. And if it's something to know, I know it." Angela said, "Precisely what I thought. Talk to me, Donovan." Donovan said, "That young bull is shaping up to be a fine young man. You and my brother have done a great..." Angela said, "Donovan." Donovan said, "What? I already told you what it is, so what you trying to get me to tell you, Angela?" Angela said, "I need to know that my son has his head on straight, that he has all the tools he needs, that..." Donovan said, "I got him. Got him. His pops got him. My pops got him. Even in the afterlife. Listen, right? When I came back from my little ordeal in Florida, one of the first things I did was see my nephew and my niece. I wasn't happy that they inserted themselves in that situation, but I was hella proud of how they showed up and stood 10 toes. How they executed that whole situation was freaking phenomenal. Chef's kiss. I knew immediately they was both gonna be forces to be reckoned with. Melissa got just enough crazy in her to..." Angela said, "All right now." Donovan said, "I'm serious. They both got the perfect balance of crazy as hell and lovers of Christ. And as a minister of the gospel, I gotta say that I don't even think God would have a problem with how they give it up." Angela said, "What?" Donovan said, "I'm serious. On Big G, when the Israelites was warring with the Canaanites, God told them to kill everything moving. Same God back then, same God right now." Angela said, "Donovan, are you taking your medication?" Donovan said, "Yeah, taking my meds, reading my Bible, drinking my water, loving my woman and kids. And I'm telling you, Michael is a man, baby." Angela said, "Please tell me that you didn't encourage him to go out there and do something that he's going to regret, that he can't take back." Donovan said, "Of course not. And I told him what my pops told me. Don't do nothing you can't live with. Don't do nothing you can't answer to God for when it's time, because you will answer to God for it. I told him to let his conscience lead him. I also told him that his emotions won't keep him safe. So no matter how he feel about this girl or how he feel about what that little knucklehead did, logic and reason is his best friend. I also told him that it's real easy to put your hands on somebody in anger. It's even easier to pull a pistol. Sometimes violence feels like the answer, but it's not always the answer. I'm a well-rounded individual, Angela. And according to my medical records, I'm a savant. Quiet as is kept, so is Michael. Don't be like Medea. Don't learn the hard way that you can either flow with your son or flow against him. And how you choose to respond to how he chooses to handle this is going to be the deciding factor in how your relationship proceeds from here on out. Listen, let me put your mind at ease. I've spent the last few months teaching my nephew everything I know, and everything I've taught him, he's mastered. I don't know if you've missed the muscle mass on that boy, but I've seen him in the weight room, and that man is a monster. I had that boy spin around 3 times, blindfolded with a pistol in his hand. And I recorded for ish and giggles, because I just knew that when that target started moving, he was going to miss terribly. I had egg on my face when he hit that target, and as soon as I released the second one, he hit that one too. Did I mention that he was blindfolded and had spent around 360 3 times? Angela said, "Yes, you mentioned that part." "What the hell was you preparing him for, Donovan? The invasion of the damn body snatchers?" Donovan said, "No, that's stupid. I was preparing him to take care of you, to protect his mother, his sisters, the wife and children that he's going to have one day." War is in that boy's blood. I wasn't preparing him to start one, but I was damn sure preparing him to handle one. The lessons weren't just about being able to lift a grown man or gunplay. They were also about outsmarting your opponent, using their own weaknesses against them, manipulating the things that they value in response to their manipulation of the things you value. And to be honest, my favorite lessons with him were the ones where I taught him how to center himself, how to slow the world down around him, and how to use what he knows to make predictions that are damn near 100% accurate. Not just the next step, but the next 5. And Angela, when I tell you that man got it, he got it.
Can't even get no sleep, I've been on overtime. God ain't put us here to doubt, we supposed to shine. Floss up, and when you talk down, talk up.